In a bustling city where people from all walks of life came together, there lived a man named Liam Harper. He was well known in his circle a sharp-tongued corporate lawyer who had built a reputation for being confident, sometimes bordering on arrogant. His tailored suits and flashy cars screamed success, but beneath that polished exterior lay a streak of dismissiveness toward those he deemed different or less privileged than him. On the other side of this vibrant city was Elena Morales, a quiet yet determined woman who worked as a nurse at a local hospital. She had moved to the country years ago from Colombia, leaving behind everything familiar to chase a dream of helping others. Despite facing countless challenges, language barriers, cultural differences, and even judgmental stares, Elena never lost sight of her purpose. Her warm smile and gentle voice made patients feel cared for, even when she struggled to pronounce certain words just right because of her accent. Their worlds collided one evening at a charity gala hosted by Liam's law firm. The event was meant to raise money for underprivileged communities, and Elena had been invited as a guest speaker due to her tireless work in underserved neighborhoods. As she stepped onto the stage, dressed modestly but with pride, the room fell silent. Elena began speaking passionately about the importance of healthcare access for everyone, regardless of their background. Her words carried weight, driven by first-hand experience and unwavering dedication, but not everyone in the audience was paying attention to her message. Sitting near the back, Liam leaned over to his colleague and whispered something snarky about how hard it is to take someone seriously when they can't even pronounce their vowels properly. A few people chuckled nervously while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elena, though hurt, chose not to let the comment derail her. Instead, she continued delivering her speech with grace, letting her passion speak louder than any insult. Afterward, as guests mingled over drinks and hors d'oeuvres, Liam decided to approach Elena not out of respect, but curiosity. With a smirk, he asked her if she really believed people like him, wealthy and influential, actually cared about causes like hers. Elena looked at him calmly, her eyes steady despite the tension simmering beneath the surface. "Change often comes from unexpected places," she replied simply before excusing herself to talk to someone else. Liam watched her walk away, feeling oddly unsettled but unsure why. He brushed it off, convincing himself that someone like Elena couldn't possibly understand his world. And so, the night ended without either of them thinking much more about the encounter. Little did they know, fate had plans to bring them back together in ways neither could have imagined. What started as a fleeting moment of mockery would soon spiral into a story of redemption, courage, and an unlikely connection. But for now, both went their separate ways, unaware of the storm brewing ahead, a storm that would test them, challenge them, and ultimately change them forever. Months passed after that charity gala, and life moved on for both individuals in its own unpredictable way. Liam continued his high-powered career, burying himself in courtrooms, meetings, and late-night strategy sessions. He rarely thought about the nurse with the accent he'd mocked that night, except for fleeting moments when guilt would creep in uninvited. But those moments were brief, pushed aside by his busy schedule and the distractions of his privileged world. Elena, on the other hand, remained steadfast in her mission. Her days were filled with long shifts at the hospital, tending to patients who often had no one else to turn to. She worked tirelessly, sometimes skipping meals just to ensure everyone received the care they needed. Despite the challenges, she found joy in small victories, a patient recovering, a family expressing gratitude, or even a child smiling despite their pain. For Elena, these moments reminded her why she left her homeland and endured so much hardship to be where she was today. Then came a cold winter evening that neither of them would ever forget. The roads were slick with ice, and snowflakes danced wildly in the freezing air. Liam had spent the day locked in negotiations over a high-stakes case, leaving him exhausted and eager to get home. As he drove along the highway, his mind wandered, replaying snippets of the day's events. Suddenly, without warning, his car skidded on a patch of black ice. Panic surged through him as he fought to regain control, but it was too late. His vehicle swerved off the road, crashing into a ditch with a deafening crunch. Metal groaned, Glass shattered, and the world around him seemed to spin out of focus. When the chaos finally settled, Liam found himself trapped inside the mangled wreckage, blood trickling down his temple. Pain shot through his body, and fear gripped him like never before. With trembling hands, he managed to grab his phone and dial emergency services. Each ring felt like an eternity as he waited for help to arrive. Time blurred together. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Eventually, the distant wail of sirens broke through the silence, giving him a sliver of hope. Paramedics rushed to the scene, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they assessed the situation, and then, as if scripted by some unseen force, one of the paramedics leaned into view. It was Elena. Her face was calm and focused, though her eyes betrayed the urgency of the moment. Recognition hit Liam instantly, and a wave of shame washed over him. Of all people, she was here saving him. The irony wasn't lost on him, and for a moment he wondered if this was some kind of cosmic punishment for his earlier behavior. Elena didn't hesitate. She blocked out any personal feelings and threw herself into the task at hand. Working. Quickly and efficiently, she checked his vitals, stabilized his injuries, and coordinated with her team to extract him safely from the car. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. Despite the biting cold and the intensity of the situation, she radiated strength and determination. As Liam lay there, helpless and vulnerable, something shifted within him. He watched Elena move with purpose, her voice steady as she gave instructions to her colleagues. There was no trace of anger or resentment in her demeanor, only professionalism and compassion. It struck him how effortlessly she put aside whatever animosity she might have felt toward him, choosing instead to focus on saving his life. Once he was secured onto a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance, Elena climbed in beside him. Throughout the ride to the hospital, she monitored his condition closely, ensuring he remained stable. Liam wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. Instead, he lay there, staring up at her, grappling with emotions he couldn't quite name. When they arrived at the hospital, Elena handed him over to the medical staff, who whisked him away for further treatment. As she stepped back, watching the flurry of activity around him, she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Saving lives was her job, yes, but this particular rescue weighed heavier on her heart than most. She knew exactly who he was. Man who had mocked her accent, dismissed her efforts, and treated her with condescension. Yet none of that mattered when it came to doing what was right. Later that night, as Liam drifted in and out of consciousness in his hospital bed, fragments of the accident replayed in his mind. He remembered the sound of screeching tires, the sharp pain of impact, and then her face, Elena's face. She had been there, risking her own safety to pull him from the wreckage. That realization gnawed at him, stirring feelings of guilt and regret he hadn't anticipated. The next morning, when a nurse came to check on him, Liam asked hesitantly, "Who was the paramedic last night?" "The one who helped me?" The nurse smiled warmly. "Oh, that was Elena. She's one of our best. Always goes above and beyond for her patients." Liam nodded slowly, processing the information. He already knew her name, of course, but hearing someone speak so highly of her only deepened his sense of awe and shame. He realized now that she wasn't just the woman he'd mocked at the gala. She was someone brave, skilled, and selfless, qualities he hadn't taken the time to see before. Over the following days, Liam underwent several tests and procedures to ensure he hadn't sustained any serious internal injuries. During this time, Elena occasionally crossed his path as part of the rotating staff assigned to his care. Their interactions were brief and strictly professional. She greeted him politely, asked routine questions about his recovery, and moved on without lingering. There was no sign of resentment or bitterness in her tone, which somehow made Liam feel worse. Each encounter left him more conflicted. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he hadn't meant to belittle her, that he was sorry for the things he'd said, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he possibly make amends for something so callous? And would she even accept his apology? After everything? Meanwhile, Elena carried on with her duties, treating Liam like any other patient. On the surface, she appeared unfazed by their shared history, but inwardly she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her resented the way he'd treated her, while another part understood that everyone makes mistakes. Still, she chose to focus on the present, letting her actions speak louder than her thoughts. By the time Liam was discharged from the hospital, he couldn't shake the memory of Elena's calm presence during the accident. She had saved his life not because she owed him anything, but because it was simply who she was. This realization planted a seed of change within him, though he didn't yet know where it would lead. What he did know was that he couldn't go back to being the same person he was before. Something had shifted, and he was determined to figure out what it meant for himself and for the woman who had shown him grace when he least deserved it. After the accident, Liam's life slowly began to return to normal, or at least what passed for normal in his fast-paced world. The physical injuries healed with time, but the emotional scars lingered. Every time he thought about the crash, his mind drifted back to her face, Elena, her calm demeanor, her steady hands, and the way she had worked tirelessly to save him despite how he'd treated her. It haunted him. He couldn't shake off the feeling that fate had stepped in to teach him a lesson, one he wasn't sure he deserved. As part of his recovery process, Liam had to visit the hospital several times for follow-up appointments. Each trip brought a mix of dread and anticipation because there was always a chance he might run into her again. And every time their paths crossed, the tension between them was palpable. Elena remained polite, professional, and distant, never giving him an opening to say more than a quick thank you or how are you. It frustrated Liam not because she was rude, but because she seemed so indifferent. One afternoon, while waiting for his appointment in the hospital lobby, Liam overheard two nurses chatting nearby. They were talking about Elena, though they didn't realize he was listening. One of them said, "Did you hear? She used to work in Colombia, treating people in villages controlled by armed groups. Can you imagine risking your life like that?" The other nurse nodded, adding, "Yeah, and she still volunteers extra hours here when we're short-staffed." Honestly, I don't know how she does it, Liam froze. He had no idea about any of this. Sure, he knew she was dedicated that much. Was obvious from the way she carried herself, but he hadn't realized the depth of her courage or the sacrifices she'd made. Intrigued and maybe a little ashamed, he decided to dig deeper. That evening, after returning home, he sat down at his computer and started researching her background. What he found left him speechless. Articles popped up detailing Elena's work in Colombia, where she had risked her life to provide medical care in areas ravaged by violence. There were stories of her traveling miles on foot to reach remote villages, often with limited supplies and under constant threat. In one interview, she spoke about the fear she felt every day, not for herself but for the families who relied on her. She described moments when gunfire echoed in the distance, forcing her to hide with patience until it was safe to move again. Yet through all of that, she stayed committed to her mission, driven by a belief that everyone deserved access to health care, regardless of where they lived. Reading these accounts, Liam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Here was a woman who had faced real danger, who had put her own safety on the line for strangers, and he had mocked her accent at a charity gala. The contrast between her actions and his words hit him like a punch to the gut. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to sit quietly and reflect, not just on what he'd said to her, but on the kind of person he had become. Over the next few weeks, Liam made a conscious effort to change. He began volunteering at community clinics, something he had never considered before. At first, it felt awkward, like stepping into unfamiliar territory, but the gratitude in the eyes of the people he helped reminded him why Elena did what she did. Slowly, he started understanding the importance of empathy and humility, qualities he had once dismissed as unnecessary in his high-powered world. During one of his hospital visits, Liam finally mustered the courage to approach Elena directly. This time, he didn't have a snide remark or a dismissive attitude. Instead, he walked up to her hesitantly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. When she turned to face him, he could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes. "I wanted to apologize," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "for what I said at the gala. about, your accent. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. Elena studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his relief, she gave a small nod. Thank you for saying that, she replied. Simply, holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. We all make mistakes. Her response caught him off guard. He had expected resistance, maybe even rejection, but instead she offered forgiveness without hesitation. It wasn't absolution, exactly more like an acknowledgement that people can grow. Still, Liam knew this was only the beginning. An apology wasn't enough to erase the damage he'd done, and he understood that earning her trust would take time. Determined to prove he meant what he said, Liam continued showing up at the clinic where Elena occasionally volunteered. At first, she kept her distance, observing him from afar as he interacted with patients and staff. But as weeks turned into months, she began to notice subtle changes in him. He listened more, interrupted less, and showed genuine interest in the stories of those around him. It was clear he was trying, and for someone like Elena, who valued effort over perfection, that mattered. Their conversations gradually evolved from stiff formalities to meaningful exchanges. One evening, after a long day at the clinic, they found themselves sitting together in the break room. The air was filled with the faint smell of coffee and disinfectant, and the hum of fluorescent lights provided a comforting backdrop. You've changed, Elena said softly, breaking the silence. I can see it. Liam looked at her, surprised by her observation. Is that a good thing? She smiled, a hint of warmth softening her features. It depends on whether you keep going or stop now. Her words struck a chord within him. Change wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And if he truly wanted to honor the lessons she had inadvertently taught him, he needed to keep moving forward. From that day on, Liam threw himself into initiatives aimed at bridging gaps in healthcare access. He used his influence to advocate for better funding for community clinics and programs supporting immigrant healthcare workers. He also became a vocal supporter of cultural sensitivity training within his firm, encouraging colleagues to embrace diversity rather than fear it. Through it all, Elena remained a guiding presence, offering advice and encouragement whenever he needed it. Though their friendship grew steadily, it was built on mutual respect rather than forced closeness. Elena didn't expect Liam to transform overnight, nor did she demand anything from him. What mattered most was that he was willing to learn to listen, to grow, and to become someone better than he had been before. And for Liam, that was enough. Enough to remind him that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a future worth remembering. As months turned into years, the bond between Liam and Elena grew stronger, though it remained rooted in mutual respect rather than anything overly familiar. Their interactions were no longer strained or awkward. Instead, they carried a quiet ease that came from understanding each other's worlds better. Liam had come a long way since the days when he dismissed people based on superficial judgments, and Elena had softened her initial wariness of him. Recognizing the sincerity of his transformation, Liam often found himself thinking about the stories Elena had shared, her time in Colombia, the dangers she faced, and the sacrifices she made to help others. Those tales stayed with him, inspiring him to push harder for change within his own sphere of influence. He began using his position as a lawyer not just to chase corporate victories, but to advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Whether it was defending underprivileged families facing eviction or helping secure funding for community clinics, Liam threw himself into causes that aligned with Elena's values. Elena noticed these changes, of course, and while she rarely commented on them directly, her subtle nods of approval spoke volumes. She appreciated that Liam didn't try to take credit for things he hadn't done or pretend to be something he wasn't. Instead, he worked quietly, letting his actions do the talking. It was a quality she admired deeply, one that reminded her of the resilience she saw in so many of her patients, the kind that came from genuine effort rather than grand gestures. One day, during a particularly busy week at the hospital, Liam showed up unexpectedly with coffee and sandwiches for the staff. "Thought you all could use a pick-me-up," he said with a sheepish smile as he handed out the food. The gesture was small, but it meant a lot to the overworked team. Elena raised an eyebrow at him, amused by his sudden appearance. What? I can't just drop by to say thank you? He joked, trying to sound casual. But deep down, he knew this was his way of showing gratitude not just to her but to everyone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Their conversations became more frequent, too. Sometimes, after a long shift, Elena would sit with Liam in the hospital cafeteria, sharing bits and pieces of her life. She told him about her family back in Colombia, how proud they were of her, even though they worried about her safety. She spoke about the joy she felt when she saw a patient recover, and the heartbreak she endured when someone slipped away despite her best efforts. Each story painted a vivid picture of a woman driven by compassion and purpose, someone who gave everything she had without expecting anything in return. Liam listened intently, soaking in every word. He realized how much he still had to learn, not just about Elena, but about the world beyond his privileged bubble. For years he had lived in a cocoon of success, insulated from the struggles of those around him. Now, thanks to Elena, he was beginning to see the cracks in that cocoon. And while it wasn't always comfortable, it was necessary. In turn, Liam opened up to Elena about his own insecurities. He confessed how empty his achievements had felt before meeting her, how he had chased accolades and wealth without ever stopping to ask if any of it truly mattered. I used to think success was about winning, he admitted one evening. But now I realize it's about making a difference, no matter how small. Elena smiled softly, her eyes reflecting wisdom beyond her years. You're already making a difference, she said. Sometimes the smallest steps are the hardest ones to take. Her words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. They reminded him that growth wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. And every step he took toward becoming a better person was a victory in itself. Eventually, Liam decided it was time to organize another charity event, a gala similar to the one where they had first met. Only this time, he wanted it to be different. He reached out to Elena, asking if she would co-host the event with him. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to revisit the memories of that night. But Liam was persistent, explaining that he wanted to honor her work and highlight the importance of healthcare access for underserved communities. This isn't about me, he insisted. It's about giving a platform to people like you who are doing incredible things. Touched by his sincerity, Elena agreed. Together, they planned the event meticulously, ensuring it celebrated diversity and inclusion in ways the previous gala had failed to do. They invited speakers from various backgrounds, showcased stories of resilience and hope, and raised funds for programs aimed at supporting immigrant healthcare workers. The night of the gala arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Guests mingled, inspired by the powerful narratives unfolding on stage. When it was time for Liam and Elena to address the crowd, Liam stepped up to the microphone first. He looked out at the sea of faces, his heart pounding in his chest. A few years ago, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I stood here and made a mistake, one I'm not proud of. I judged someone based on their accent, dismissing their contributions because I thought I knew better. He paused, glancing at Elena, who stood beside him with a calm expression. That person saved my life not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. She taught me the value of empathy, humility, and second chances. The room fell silent, captivated by his honesty. Then, turning to Elena, Liam added, Tonight is about celebrating heroes like her, people who dedicate their lives to serving others, often without recognition. Let's honor them by committing ourselves to creating a world where everyone has access to care, dignity, and respect. The audience erupted into applause, moved by his heartfelt words. When Elena took the mic next, she thanked Liam for his courage and acknowledged the collective efforts of everyone in the room. Change doesn't happen overnight, she said, her voice filled with conviction. But when we come together with open hearts and minds, we can build bridges that last. By the end of the night, the gala had raised more money than anyone expected. But for Liam and Elena, the true victory lay in the connections forged and the awareness sparked. As they stood side by side, watching guests leave with smiles and renewed purpose, Liam leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for everything," Elena glanced at him, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "We all have the power to change," she replied. "All we need is the will to start." And with that they parted ways for the night, forever connected by a journey that had begun with mockery and misunderstanding but ended with redemption and respect. It was proof that even the most unlikely relationships could blossom into something meaningful if only we dared to let them. The charity gala marked a turning point not just for Liam and Elena, but for the community they were trying to uplift. The event had sparked conversations that extended far beyond the walls of the venue. People began talking about healthcare, access, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of recognizing unsung heroes like Elena. For Liam, it felt like the culmination of everything he'd been working towards since that fateful night, when his car skidded off the icy road. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. In the weeks following the gala, Liam threw himself into new projects with renewed vigor. He partnered with local organizations to create scholarships for immigrant healthcare workers, ensuring they had opportunities to advance their careers. He also worked closely with hospitals to implement training programs focused on empathy and cross-cultural communication. These initiatives weren't glamorous or headline-grabbing, but they made a tangible difference in people's lives, and that's what mattered most to him. Elena, meanwhile, continued her work at the hospital, treating patients with the same dedication she always had. But now, she noticed subtle changes in the way people interacted with her. Colleagues who once overlooked her contributions started seeking her advice. Patients expressed gratitude not just for her care, but for the warmth and understanding she brought to every interaction. Even strangers approached her after hearing about her story, thanking her for inspiring them to look beyond stereotypes and embrace diversity. Despite their growing influence, neither Liam nor Elena sought the spotlight. They were content to let their actions speak for themselves, quietly building bridges where there had once been divides. Their friendship became a source of strength for both of them, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways they might never fully understand. One evening, as autumn leaves painted the city streets in hues of gold and crimson, Liam invited Elena to join him for dinner at a cozy restaurant downtown. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet place with good food and warm lighting, but it felt special all the same. As they sat across from each other, sipping coffee and sharing stories, Liam couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since their first encounter. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I used to think success was about climbing ladders and collecting trophies. But now I realize it's about connection, the relationships we build, the lives we touch." Elena nodded thoughtfully, stirring her cup of tea. "That's true," she replied. "But success isn't just about reaching the top. Sometimes it's about pulling others up with you." Her words struck a chord within him, reminding him of the journey they'd shared, from the moment he mocked her accent to standing beside her at the gala. Their story was one of growth and transformation. And while he knew he could never undo the past, he took comfort in knowing that he had done his best to make amends. As the night wore on, their conversation turned lighter, filled with laughter and shared memories. They talked about the challenges they'd faced, the victories they'd celebrated, and the lessons they'd learned along the way. For the first time in years, Liam felt truly at peace with himself, with his choices, and with the person sitting across from him. When the check arrived, Liam reached for it instinctively, but Elena stopped him with a playful smile. "Let me get this one," she said firmly. "After all, you've already done so much." He chuckled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Fair enough," he said, "but next time it's on me." They left the restaurant together, walking side by side through the crisp autumn air. The city buzzed around them, alive with the sounds of traffic and distant music. Yet amidst the chaos, they found solace in each other's company, a testament to how far they'd come. Over the months that followed, their paths continued to intertwine. Whether it was collaborating on new projects, attending community events, or simply catching up over coffee, they remained steadfast supporters of one another. Their friendship wasn't perfect, never claimed to be, but it was real, built on a foundation of trust, respect, and shared values. Eventually, word of their partnership spread, inspiring others to follow suit. Young professionals looked up to Liam as an example of someone who had used his privilege for good. Nurses and doctors admired Elena for her unwavering commitment to patient care. Together, they became symbols of hope, a reminder that change was possible. Even in a world often divided by differences, years later, when asked about their unlikely bond, Liam summed it up perfectly. "She saved my life not just by pulling me out of that car, but by showing me what it means to live with purpose. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor that gift." Elena, ever humble, simply smiled. "We all have the power to change," she said. "All we need is the courage to start." And so, their story came full circle, a tale of redemption, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. It was proof that even in moments of judgment and misunderstanding, there was always room for growth. That even the most broken relationships could be mended with patience, humility, and a willingness to listen. And that sometimes the people we least expect can teach us the greatest lessons of all. As they walked away from the restaurant that night, bathed in the golden glow of streetlights, neither of them knew exactly what the future held. But one thing was certain: whatever came next, they would face it together, not as two individuals bound by circumstance, but as friends united by a shared vision for a better world.